Hello, everyone, and welcome to FCI Live 2026. This is our second week, and we're excited to have you here for Less State for From Startup to Staying Power: Lessons from a Lifetime in a Food Co-op with Jan Rasikas and Viroqua Food Co-op. I will be saying more about her and the session in a moment. I want to real quickly thank, and I did it again, our champion sponsors, Frontier Co-op, Cabot Creamery Co-op, and National Co-op Grocers. These three cooperatives together really make it possible for this entire series to exist and be free to cooperators across the nation. So thank you so much to them for making today possible. All right, more and more people showing up. And here's why they're showing up. They're showing up to talk with Jan Rasikas, Viroqua Food Co-op's general manager, for quite a while. I'll let you tell her how long. But I started out as a general manager at a food co-op in my region, which is good drive from where Jan is, but still in the same region, 21 years ago. And when I did, I had two really powerful, important mentors, three actually, that stepped forward. And one of them was Jan Rasikas, and I showed up on her doorstep with a baby in tow and said, "Can you train me for a couple days?" And that is not an uncommon thing with Jan. She has been a mentor to so many, and been to touch so many cooperatives with her experience and her knowledge. Super excited to have her here with us today to talk about the experience of being a startup and then what it means to become a fully embodied living co-op and what that is like. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second and let Jan has a slide she'd like to share with you all as she kind of introduces herself and her co-op before we get into the conversation.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me, and I'm pretty excited to be here. And I will say right out front, I have a healthy dose of a little stage fright. So bear with me while I get in the swing of things here. Up on the screen, though, is the three different locations of the Viroqua Food Co-op over the years. I've been the GM for about 27 years. I moved to Viroqua 1 year after the co-op opened. And I worked there for about a year and a half and then went to Organic Valley for a couple of years. Organic Valley is in our backyard. Their headquarters are right in our county. And then they said, we're ready for a full-time GM and we want you to apply. And I did and got the job. Scary as that seems. We were in this little tiny building behind the hardware store, and it was affectionately known as the hovel. It was really small, 700 square feet. And we actually did, we were there for the first 10 years and we were doing 1,000,003 out of that square footage. But let me say a little bit about Viroqua so you understand where we are here. So Viroqua's population in 1995 was 3,700 and it today is 4,500. So it's grown a little bit, but not a lot. We're about 30 miles south of La Crosse, which the metropolitan area of La Crosse is about 100,000. So still not close to a big metropolis in any kind of a way. We had a local independent grocer for many, many years who finally went out of business about a year and a half ago. We have a super Walmart and an Aldi came last year. So we don't have natural foods competition directly in our town, but we do have two of the biggest discounters of food and of organic food sellers in on the planet, really, certainly in our country. So that presents some difficulty. And people live in Viroqua and drive to La Crosse for work every day. That's a 35-mile drive. That's not too much for people to take there. So when we started in 95, of course, like many co-ops did, there was a buyers club and it had about 95 families that were using the buyers club that got too unwieldy and they came together and said, let's start a co-op. And so they did. And the only other thing I'll say, because we'll touch on other stuff, is Viroqua is unusual in that it has a Waldorf school. And it was at the time the only real rural Waldorf school, went from kindergarten all the way through high school. And that attracted folks and a lot of like-minded folks that were the startup of our co-op. We have a pretty large Amish community, and like I said, Organic Valley is in our backyard. So that brings a lot of industry type folks to our area and folks who are interested in local and organic food and get the support, right? The perceived support. I have a realtor friend who has said for 25 years, every month she gets a call that says somebody wants to live in the organic valley. And she says, sure, we can do that. So we have a great amount of small farms with that kind of perception that happens at start. And so that's driven a lot of our own growth as well. So I'm going to stop there. I think the last thing I would say is that first year that I was here, we did $130,000 worth of sales at the end of the year. And this year, which we're a few months away from finishing our fiscal year, we're going to be at about 12.6 million. So it's pretty wild growth.
It's extremely rare. Those who are not food co-op experienced here on the call, that is very rare, very wild growth.
Yeah, we're an unusual demographic kind of way to look at cooperatives.
But
But
also, go ahead.
I think I'll stop there. Okay.
Okay. I say, but also I want to say that a lot of that success has everything to do not only with Jan's acumen as a business leader for a food co-op, but also something that's really important. I talk to you guys about startups all the time, which is she really understands her community and how to serve it, what it needs. And sometimes there's a lot more potential there than you know if somebody has the combination of both. But we're going to transition to picking Jan's brain about all sorts of things that I thought would be really useful to hear about what it's like to live a cooperative, to run a cooperative. Some of the things that you haven't experienced yet is startup food co-ops with Jan. And Viroqua was unusual. You might have seen the opening 1995. Technically, they're not really part of the second or third wave. The second wave of co-ops happened in the 1970s, and the third wave is considered its earliest to have started around 2000. And so it was this rare handful of startup food co-ops that started in that era, and they are one of those. So I wanted to talk to you about, I know I pre-warned you a little bit. I wanted to talk to you about what I call co-op special. Every food co-op is, like I said, incredibly unique. The community is unique. Understanding that community, what they need, is so important. And we all believe that because it's true. Our co-op's unique. But as you and I have also discussed, I mean, we as cooperators, you and I both have fallen into the trap of thinking, therefore, certain things, don't apply to us, that, going with what we know about our community can trump true business metrics. And that balance is hard to understand and strike. I wondered if you could talk about your experience with that.
Yeah, that's a great point to start with. I can say there was a real specific point in time that changed my thinking about this topic. Because Viroqua is pretty special, right? We got a Waldorf school, we have school choice, we had medical choice because of the Amish. The midwives were working out of the hospital. We had an MD practicing classical homeopathy right out of our county hospital. Weird stuff like that that made us kind of special for this really small town. But when we were first thinking about moving from the little store to our middle-sized store, which is a relocation, really, we hired Pete Davis to do a market study for us. And that was Debbie Sasana's predecessor, really, for the co-op world. And we met Pete, me and my board of directors, in the handwork room of the Waldorf school. It was adorable. We sat on little kindergarten chairs and all this beautiful stuff because we wanted to show him how special it was. And he listened carefully to us for, God, probably 20, 30 minutes about all the individual, weird things that were going on in Viroqua. And then he finally said, that's really great. You are special, but I don't do special. I do science. And that just kind of blew my mind. So he pretty much said, here's the grocery dollar. Here's how much of the grocery dollar is natural and organic. Here's how much of the share you have. So here's how much you can grow. That's the science of a market study. And that's what you should be looking at. That's what you should be making decisions on. If you have special, that's extra. Not everybody has that, and that would be great. But that's not what you make your decisions on. It really changed me because Like many of you, I'm guessing you did not go to school to be a grocery store manager or a cooperative manager. We come from all kinds of backgrounds and we're learning on the job. Certainly that was true for me. So, the things that you have to do then, the difference between being unique in your community and the realities of running a grocery store and making good decisions about what you put on the shelf and how many people you hire and all the things that make it work becomes real fast. And then balancing the cost of your mission and the cost of natural and organic foods for your members, against the things that you think you want your co-op to achieve. Those can become real barriers to success, and you have to have this very broad view. When we first went from the small store to our medium-sized store, one of the top three important things, according to our members, was that we had a beautiful landscape and green space around our store, which we did. That was a top priority and we did it. But I'm here to tell you 20 years later, when we moved from that little store to the medium-sized store, we are pulling weeds by hand because no one is going to let me spray chemicals on those weeds every year, right? And the cost of having 23 trees around our perimeter is expensive and we do it, but it does add to the price of what we sell and the cost of what we do. So that long-term kind of vision about what you're choosing as a priority is super important.
I think that one's such an interesting example. I love it because it's what the owners wanted. So the member owners wanted this, you went forward. It has this intense cost, but you did admit too, it's also had one of the impacts they wanted in changing the community. You guys
Yeah.
kind of kicked off as something that changed the whole community from what you said.
Yeah, yeah. In many small towns, especially in failing rural towns, which still happens in our country today, the sidewalk and the street were just, a curb apart. There was nothing on Main Street that really was green space specific or even city planning that allowed for a tree to be planted in between the buildings and the sidewalk and the street. And we did spur other businesses that built on Main Street and that rehabbed buildings on Main Street to consider what landscaping could be because of the co-op. So that did make a difference. But I would say too, one of the other things that is really important when you're starting up like that is to really think about the cooperative business structure itself and what that allows you to do as a business, right? A co-op structure is not quite capitalism, right? We live in a capitalist. We still have to do our profit and loss income statements and our balance sheet just like everybody else does, but we think about it. We get to think about it differently because co-op structure focuses on people, and it allows for social change if that's what your group wants to do, right? And you state that through your policies and mission statement and the things and ends policies if you're going to work with policy governance, which I think is a good idea. That changed us too when we switched over. But it allows you to go in a different direction and still run a business. It's super important. So, co-op structure allows your community to get what it needs that it can't get any other way. And a really great example of this is, rural electrification when electricity came to farms, right? We still have an electric co-op in our community because we're an agricultural community where that electric company didn't want to string wire all the way out in the country for one farm. They had to come together as a cooperative to get energy to their farms. It's the same for us when we want natural and organic or local foods. It's not always a part of a business plan that another business will soak up and do. In order to have access to that product, we've got to come together, pool our money together, use cooperative structure to get it.
Absolutely. And I think this kind of leads me back to something you said to me a long time ago. As I might mention some folks might know, I used to be a GM a long time ago, and Jan was one of my mentors as a young GM. And you said something that really stuck with me. And it sounds like a very simple statement, but you've got to get clear about what a co-op actually is. I thought I knew what that meant. I thought I knew what a co-op was. And I had a lot of misconceptions that you helped me down the road of starting to see. I think sometimes we think co-op and we think, and we all make collective decisions and everyone gets what they want. And that's what democracy looks like. You'd think we'd know better living in democracy right now, but can you just speak to that a little bit about what you meant by get clear about what a co-op actually is?
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think it is a difficult spot, right? Let's start at the beginning. You've got to know your state cooperative statutes first off, because they're a little bit different state to state. So get familiar with your state statutes. It's the law for how a co-op operates, and it's pretty specific. In our state, in Wisconsin, for instance, consumer co-ops like a food co-op cannot have a business member. That's not in our structure. In some states, that's different. But that's really important to know before you say, yeah, businesses, come on, join, you can buy for your business. That is not part of structure in our state. So even, that kind of specificity when you're setting up a co-op can really drive the decisions that you make in your own bylaws and articles. Um, and, co-ops are democratic organizations, like you said, JQ, and a simple majority wins, right? So your representation of the whole membership is through an elected board of directors, and they decide. They get to take member feedback, but in the end, material decisions are driven by a board of directors with the help of their expert general manager, right? That's the expert that they lean on about running the store. But really get clear on who makes decisions because that's going to help you in the long run. Um, you know, I think there's a reoccurring couple of reoccurring points of contention in co-ops. The board represents everyone, right? The whole membership, and it's their job to periodically review a mission statement to see if it's still relevant for the members who are there. Because when you're talking about a majority, that will change over time.
Very true.
Um, so does it represent the membership today, right? That's a board's job is to take a look at that every now and then and say, is our mission still relevant? Or does it only represent the founders, for example?
Mm.
Because when you've got a co-op that's starting on founding principles 20 years later, it's not going to look the same, even 10 years later, if your membership grows quickly. And you've got to constantly reassess and keep it real because you want members to have access to what it is that they want. That's a really tricky spot, right? We tell our owners to walk in like you own the place, and then they don't always get exactly what they want because it's not really consensus, right? It's
Right?
democratic majority wins kind of thinking. So it's both, I've been known to say it's both the challenge and the reward to move a big group of people around like a cooperative membership. And it's a constant tug and pull. But
I think
I
if I
like,
can ask you here, because this is a common thing that I think startups don't see coming. And I think you've kind of experienced it with your expansions, which is they're like, because the founders, that core group, that's who's organizing the food co-op, right? And so they will open a store, and we have found statistically that usually right around 40% of the shopping dollars will come from people who owned the co-op before it opened. And then 60% of them are from somebody brand new. And I know I experienced expansion. People walked in and were like, who are these people? Their goals are a little different. Did you experience that as well in that calibration to we represent who owns the co-op, not just our original opinions?
yeah, it's there's a little bit of a check and balance in there when you collect the data. Like we all have a membership number that we shop under, so we know the percent of sales that goes to members. And there's a sweet spot. You got to be over 50%, or you probably don't have the right products that your members want. But you can't be 80% because that's not enough new people walking in the store to, keep a membership going and to keep your member equity building your balance sheet, right? Like, so the sweet spot is 65, 60 to 70%. That's knowing that you've got the right mix in the store that's fulfilling what your membership wants, but still bringing in new people into your community and getting them excited about what you're doing to the point where they join the co-op and support what's happening there. And I think another way to talk about that is to like really examine the word cooperative for a second.
Hmm.
And JQ, you've probably heard me say this before, but it's
Yep.
it's the difference between big C and little c, right? Capital C cooperative, that's the noun. That is the business, the brick and mortar place that we run with rules and laws and things that, are restricted. The lowercase c, the cooperating or cooperative, that's the adjective. That's the stuff we do that involves that mutual assistance and working toward a common goal. Those two are different things and they're not to be interchanged. And you kind of have to prepare to bring that clarity to your group over and over and over again. Cooperating in a cooperative is not the same as consensus. It doesn't mean everybody gets what they want.
Mm.
And so that's that separating that kind of idea and talking about what a co-op is, what co-op structure is, and why that business structure is exciting and can, make real social change happen against or versus just us cooperating and everybody moving ahead on consensus.
That consensus piece, when we say walk in like you own the place, I think people expect consensus. That's what they mean. Like, and they expect also that they're going to get what they want. Like you said, exactly what they want. I know you could probably tell stories. I can tell stories of founding owners, really well intentioned as we expanded, really amazing human beings, but who came in and said, I do not understand why you're carrying this farm's tomatoes. This farm has supported us for 20 years. And I'm like, and we worked with them and we worked with them and they decided they didn't want to handle the volume we were doing. And they said, hey, this is great. This is cool. We're going to back away. That's what they're like, well, how dare you not represent that farm? There's things I think, and I think the reason I'm asking you a little about stories around this or maybe sharing mine is that this is something startup cooperators I see experience in stage 5, which means post open. I see the board go, why didn't we do this? But why aren't we doing that? And, this, and sometimes there's really good reasons why something that was once central to what your co-op did or hoped to do has shifted. I just wondered if you have similar stories.
Yeah, of course. And
Hmm.
are you talking about like your example that about having volunteers maybe in the store?
Oh, yeah, yeah, things like that.
Yeah. Okay, so let's kind of shift then and talk a little bit about how do we you know, get to the place where we're agreeing on what we're doing and what our capacity is really in the stage that we're in, right? Because startups don't have the same capacity as enough sales and enough movement through your store to support a larger staff or a new program or finally getting an HR manager or doing the things that we do, right? It's all about capacity in the stage that you're in. And many startup co-ops start by leaning on their community and making sure everybody's coming together and helping in some way. But that's not always the goal of the co-op, right? The goal is to be a well-run organization that makes change happen and brings access to your mission and what you're doing. I'm not sure if I'm getting to your question,
No,
JQ. You
I
gotta.
think you are. I think you are. I just mean that I think that's exactly what I mean is that there's certain things we get attached to how we're going to manifest the
Mhm.
the mission and vision, and that had the right way to do that can change.
Yeah, absolutely. It's we started with volunteers, of course, and then realized, What we did was we created a special class of membership that got other privileges that other members didn't. And that's really not the cooperative one. It's one of the cooperative principles, right? P3 is equitable participation in a co-op. We all pay the same membership equity to belong, and if we do a patronage, we take equitably out of the co-op. But when we have special classes of membership, like a senior discount or a university student discount, or even a working member discount, that creates special classes that isn't the same as equitable participation. So you got to be careful there. And I would say there's nothing wrong with creating real jobs with good pay and benefits in your community. That has a much stronger lasting impact on the local economy and the health of your and the work that's coming out of your co-op, as opposed to building a volunteer structure. Now, there are co-ops out there that run on lots of volunteer labor, and there are some that are, I mean, a worker co-op is essentially that, right? So, what is the structure that you're choosing? What cooperative structure are you choosing for your co-op? And then, what are your long-term goals to get there, as opposed to just the capacity for when you start, and what kind of help you need when you're starting? What's your goal beyond that? Those are things to really, keep in mind, and to know that morphing and changing and having new members that think differently is always going to be a part of the future of your co-op. I would also go back to that democracy versus consensus kind of idea, right? Because that crops up a lot. When you, again, tell people to walk in like you own the place, they want to do that. I think a big change for us happened when we were in the medium-sized store to the store we're in now, which is a 4,400 square feet on the retail floor to 9,250 on the retail floor. Big change for us, right?
Hmm.
And we, of course, did a member survey. What if we do this? What do you want to like? What do you want? What do you see in an expanded co-op? And we got a lot of great feedback and statistical data coming back that we had analyzed, not by us. But what it does is, well, we're all kind of familiar with the bell curve, right? So when we got that information back up here at the top of the bell curve, we got wider aisles, more parking, more choice, a bigger deli, more fresh produce, the things that, this is 60, 70% of what people wanted. But if you find yourself on either edge of the
Mm.
bell curve, you're going to be disappointed, right? You're not going to get what you want. We had some people who said, I don't want to grow. I still want to scoop flour out of big garbage bins and go to my little neighborhood grocery store. And then on the opposite side, we had people saying, hey, if we're going to grow like this, let's have a brew pub inside the co-op and brew beer in the back room. And like those people are going to be disappointed, right? Because we're going to go where the majority of our folks want us to go. And that is a maybe an oversimplified version of it, but you get what I'm saying when you look at what your community wants and what they're asking for. And before you ask them what they want, you lay out the rules. Who decides, right? Whose role is what? And in a democratic, represented by a board organization like co-ops are, it's the board who does the research and who looks at all the details on behalf of the membership. And ultimately, it's their decision. Oftentimes, it's driven by the expert in the room, which should be their general manager. So we ask them what they want. Yes, that's absolutely true, but we don't ask them to decide on a material change for the store. That comes with too much responsibility and too much background research and comparison so that we're making good business decisions.
That's really useful to hear. I think if you're a startup on here, sometimes startups ask us, I understand, who are very, pro the co-op model. We're all pro the co-op model. And they're like, how do we let the owners vote on the location once we find a location, right? And we say, no, we strongly recommend against that. And people struggle with that. And I get it. You're making this huge decision on behalf of your community, right? And we've talked about that there are real risks involved, first off. Like, it took a lot to find that site. There absolutely, I don't care what community you're in, there are competitors that would absolutely, who are already selling groceries to your community, whether you have a store in it or not, and they will happily buy up that site or tie it up in litigation so you can't have it. And so there's all these business reasons, but there's also this democratic cooperative reason, which I'll be honest, we don't usually point to, that I think you're pointing to here, Jan, is I think getting our heads around representative democracy and that that's what's happening here. And I wondered, I know you just said a bit about, but more you could say about why is the board making these decisions rather than just having, let's have, however many thousand owners vote. Why and at what level, like how does that work? What level does it turn to a board decision?
Mhm. Most statutes, state statutes, lay it out really clearly. Again, go back to your statutes and see what the legal control of a cooperative is and why it works that way. There are some things that a membership does have to vote on. Dissolution is one, merging with another co-op is one. I mean, it's really spelled out pretty clearly in most cooperative statutes. And so I think, though, that mostly you cannot dig into the level of detail when you are just given a survey that says yes or no, right? We ran so many information sessions and brought people in. It's not that we're not being transparent. We had so many opportunities for members who wanted to be involved to say, this is what the market study says we can grow to. And let's take that back 15 or 20% just to take the edge off the risk. And then let's see what it looks like and do the numbers match up. And I would say in a town our size, which is, shocking to have a $12 million store, our biggest question was, why do you think Viroqua will grow that much? Why do you think we will grow so that we could become an, $12 million store in this size in the next couple of years? And we had to be ready for that. We had to know the science behind how it works. And we would say, this would be my part, right? My research part as the general manager. We know that a core shopper is about 16%, maybe 18% of most co-ops. This is Hartman Group um, research that NCG supports that has been updated through the years. But so, I'm speaking from a real study about co-ops specifically.
Hmm.
16 to 18%. The next level is about 65 to 67%. And there's a couple of groups in there, but those are called mid-level co-ops. And so, um, and then the periphery, whatever is left, right? Another 16 or 15%, whatever is left of your specific mix are periphery shoppers, those folks who come only for lunch or who are tourists in the summer or shop us just at Christmas time. And we're after that middle group. That's the biggest group. So I could say to my membership, we're going to grow, not because people are moving into Viroqua. We just need that middle group to buy 3 or 4 more things when they're here. And that's about choices and availability and running programs that are interesting, like having a real meat department, which we didn't in the smaller size stores. Growing into programs that would actually attract people to the store or stay there to buy those 2 or 3 other things. And that's what did it. So that kind of digging into detail can't be done by a membership at large. And it's hard to communicate. That's a tough story to tell. And I can do that in a few small groups when the interested people come and really want to press us for information. And we do that. That openness and transparency and involving our community is a part of who we are.
I got it's okay, by the way, as has become a tradition this month, this FCI Live, some people direct message me. They don't want to put their question in the chat, so I got a direct message question for you, which was I thought it was about creating great jobs, and now we're doing our pro forma, and I don't know that we can really create what I call great jobs. How do you wrestle with that as a cooperative?
Yeah, that is, wow, things have changed, right? Things have changed a lot. I would start by saying I'm old enough and I have been in this role long enough to have seen a really significant change in who works at a co-op and why they work at a co-op. And that champion who wanted to change the world with local and organic food and change the economy and use cooperative structure, that champion who makes it happen for free
Mhm.
because they don't get paid is gone, right? No one can survive that way anymore. So we've got to build organizations that can support the people who work there with living wage jobs and real benefits and make it work. And that means being a good grocer first and foremost. It really means choosing the right product, doing category management, pricing appropriately, not a markup, but a margin. Just all the basic things that make good business happen has to come out of the gate now. We can't pull ourselves up through a volunteer program and someone who is willing to lead us for, a pittance, a wage that's not sustainable. That's difficult. That is really difficult. And we're in a competitive market. When again, I'm old enough when natural and organic food was a niche market and we had high margins because no one could get it anywhere else. That is not the case anymore. We're operating on regular grocery margins. Now they're pretty standard and they don't deviate very much. And you have to be competitive. And we're going to be more expensive because the quality of food that we sell is higher. But it can be done.
Well, and that's one thing I want to ask you. This is my follow-up, not theirs, which is I know with food co-ops, once you're open and established, that we do regular surveys with our staff. Really, we don't just guess on, how on staff satisfaction. And our staff happy with their jobs? Are they satisfied?
Yeah, that's a part of getting wages that are good enough, right? And a benefit package um that is, decent, can support you and your family. But the biggest part for retail work, which is already an industry where people come and go or they're on their way to, we've got folks who work the cashier, the grocery stocking aisles, because they're on their way to their chosen career, right? They are going to come and go, and turnover is going to happen, but our wages have to be pretty good and our benefit packages have to be pretty good. The thing that we have the most control over because of cooperative structure and focusing on people is our workplace culture and the kind of workplaces that we want to run. And that's where you can make big gains. We're in a grocery setting. We deal with a lot of people, and trust me, people bring stuff to the grocery store every day. It's amazing. It's amazing what happens in the grocery store every day. And it's difficult. But when you have a good culture in your workplace and you're flexible enough and transparent about how the business is doing and you help people rise, then they can commit to longer periods of time in that retail environment. And that helps run a store.
Absolutely. I was talking to another GM who said that they did a recent staff survey, and they had a question was something like, I am proud to work at the co-op, agree, disagree, and they had over 90% of the staff say yes, they were proud to work at the co-op. So I think you did a really good job talking about there's realities to how much we can offer to how much our benefits pack. It's a challenge for any small business, but food co-ops have always, I think, punched way above their weight and doing well with that as small businesses. And but I hear you, it's a legitimate question. I think it's, difficult when you get through the process so far and you're like, I thought we were going to have a $20 an hour starting wage. Now, in some communities like Chicago, New York City, you might. But in a lot of communities, that's not going to be doable right away. And it does bring up emotions about the reality, because you said we are building businesses within capitalism. So I want to validate those emotions and also say, compared to most small businesses, we put a lot of energy into making sure these are the best jobs possible. And I have never seen, and I've looked, other small independent businesses of our size that are doing as well by their staff in retail as food co-ops do. So it's a balance.
Yeah, it is a balance. I like to acknowledge, especially for the management team who manages their staff, right? And I've been at all levels of that. The only manager, the next level up as we go. But in our typical business structure, the people who work for us are expenses on an income statement. That's an expense. And I want them to be an asset, right? And so just the mental exercise of making sure your staff and the things that you do, that the decisions you make about your staff as an asset and what that means in a co-op and how that spreads to the people that they serve every day and what that feeling is when you walk into a co-op, um, that's about service, right? And for us, the very first sentence in our mission statement includes superior customer service, which is hard, right? When we say it's getting expensive and labor is too high, what are you going to do about that, Rasikas? And I say, well, if we let people go, it changes the level of our service, right? So we've got to figure that out. There's a sweet spot we've got to figure out. But really, until we change those words, I'm not really going to deviate from what we do and how we build our business toward treating staff in a certain way. So all those things have to be mixed together, and it really pays off when your staff, we don't get it right every second, but when we find something that we can correct, we do it. And when something isn't right, we work on it right away. And that feeling of trust in a workplace translates to who you're serving in your community, and it gets out there. I didn't always know how to solve that, but I've come to share with my team that what the end looks like, what the end product looks like. So I would say, here's what we're going to do. I want to be known as that place where people say, how'd you get a job at the co-op? I've been trying to get in there.
Yep.
Now, I don't know all the how we're going to do that, but that's the feeling I want. So let's back up from there. And that kind of thinking has worked really great for us for all kinds of things, but especially for how we treat people.
Question from Kim in the chat that actually I'm going to broaden because she was like, does the board get to see this staff satisfaction survey? I think a lot of startup boards are like, what do we get to see? What do we get to know from our expert, from our GM
Mhm.
about operations? I know that's a really big question, but if you could share a little bit about what funnels up, what gets shared and what is kind of unreasonable to ask to your GM to have an exact view on.
Yeah. Well, here's another thing that comes from spending 27 years in a co-op. I remember opening rusty foldy chairs in the middle of the tiny little store, cracking open a bag of chips and popping a six-pack of beer, and the board saying, what are we going to talk about this month? It's like, right? So that's not a great way to go, but that's how we started. And, I'd work on stuff and we'd come to the next month and it would be a whole new set of things. And I'd say, wait, I can't solve those problems you gave me last month in 30 days. Like, you got to give me more time. So, that's the startup and the willy-nilly way
Although
that
I'm going to say that is not going to be your startup.
that
We
is
don't
not,
have the room for error anymore.
you
The
know,
board has
no,
to know their
no,
job
no. I'm
when they
just,
get
I'm
started.
just, I'm just showing you the extreme.
Yeah.
But by the time we moved into the middle-sized store, policy governance was pretty popular in co-ops across the country. And it's a model that fits. It's a corporate model from the 70s that made corporations do ends statements. Well, we've already got that. We've got mission statements. So the model itself fits well with co-ops. And policy governance does not run a co-op or run the board. It is the tool that a board uses. So when you write things down on paper and say, this is what we expect from the general manager, then we know what the job is. And so every month I'm reporting on a policy, and in those policies is staff treatment. and I put the data down. This isn't the Jan story. I don't get to write, oh, we're doing so great and everybody feels great. It's real data in a graph, very little narrative, right? This is the data that the board sees that shows we're moving toward what we wrote down on paper and said we would do together, do the work together. So that's an important tool. And if you don't pick policy governance, you still have to have policies because nobody's going to do the job if you crack a six pack of beer and say, what are we going to talk about?
If I have no idea what you're going to hold me accountable to month,
Right, right.
no one's
Because
going to
if
take that job.
no one's gonna take that job because if you step in and say, I think the board should make this happen, and that's happened to me over the years, of course, right? Then we stop and say, then you're accountable for the outcome, not me. And that's not really what they wanted, right? So we have to like work through that. I would say another big piece of a moment changing piece of advice that I got was from one of the board's consultants. We work with Colluminate and we have for many years. So they are assigned a board consultant, if you will, that kind of, works with us monthly and kind of keeps us on track and helps us solve problems. And one of them said, especially when you have new board members coming into a group, you start big decisions by saying one of two things. If it's the GM's decision, if it's the GM's role to make a decision, I start by saying, hey, you guys, I need this decision is mine, but I'm not going to make it until I hear what y'all have to say about it because you're my people, right? This is my boss and you're the leader of the co-op. And the vice versa of that is clearly this is a board decision, but don't make this decision without hearing from me and letting me give you the details about what it's like on the inside of the co-op before you make this decision. That little piece of advice changed us in such a great way. And we don't always have to say it anymore. But every now and then, when I say, I've got a challenge, I'm letting you know this is the challenge. And everybody wants to start solving the problem right away. I say, no, no, stop. This is clearly my decision. I want to hear what you have to say, but I'm going to make this decision after we have this discussion because I'm in a challenge and you're my team. You're my people. This is my
Yes.
room. This is my safe space. And when you build a relationship like that from board to GM and GM to staff, that kind of transparency and behavior really builds a great business.
Absolutely. We've got a comment from, and he does have a question at the end, but I'm reading the whole thing from Jamie because I think it needs to be said. By the way, those you don't know Jan is retiring in October after making decades of impact on the food co-op movement. So, Jamie from Belfast says, some gratitude first. I am among many who had the pleasure to work at Viroqua with Jan 10 years back now. I work at a rural food co-op today, thanks in big part to Jan's leadership and vision, and I learned a bit about balancing the heart a co-op needs with the brains and tenacity of a strong business. Kudos to Jan. Question. Any secrets or advice to help the unique issues of rural food co-ops in today's landscapes? And I'm bringing this up because startups, you should listen in on this too. Rural co-ops do face different challenges, and there are about a third of those organizing right now for new food co-ops are in rural communities. So, Jan, any advice to those
Oh,
building food co-ops in rural communities?
yeah, it's got a really great piece that fits with natural foods co-ops and co-ops that are focusing on local food economies because it's rural, right? And the option, we have 220 local businesses in our 100-mile radius that we call local that uh, did 33% of our total sales last year. Millions of dollars that we purchase from, small farms and then put that money back out that gets a retail shelf in our, right? It just has fostered a local economy that is more difficult to do in a metropolitan area. In fact, co-ops that are in Minneapolis and Chicago call our local farmers local. They have to go further out, right, to get that rural hit and to have a local farm. That's like the biggest, huge positive thing that a rural co-op can do is really create a local food economy. And then you face other things like our ratio of backroom to retail floor is higher than typical, which costs money, right? When you're 60/40, that 40 isn't earning per square feet like the retail floor is. But we have to have room to hold product because trucks don't come here. Doesn't matter how big we are. They're still only going to come once every 2 weeks
Mm.
to Viroqua. We're off the beaten path. We're not on a major highway. And if we don't have enough freezer and cooler space to hold product, we're empty for 2 days before we can get that product delivered again. And that just makes people mad. That's the co-op's always out, is what you're always out of baguettes. What's happening? Well, that's a par-baked program for us. We get them frozen and it's great ingredients. It's from a specific place, but that truck only delivers to us once every 2 weeks. You know how many boxes of baguettes are sitting in our freezer? It's crazy. So that's just an example of some of the difficulties that a rural community will face when you get to be the size that we are. And we face those challenges. And it's not always an easy comparison to what a successful grocery co-op does in another place. Um, and that's the story that you have to tell, and you have to make those decisions to see if it's worth doing that.
Yes, and I'm so glad you brought that up. I don't think we talk about enough with startups that rural communities are going to face really unique distribution problems, and the more isolated your community, the more it's going to be an issue. To the extent that if you're organizing a rural community, if you haven't found Rural Grocery Initiative yet, please check them out. They're a partner organization. They're phenomenal. They are in Kansas. And they're always looking at this problem. And there are communities that are so rural and so isolated that they can't get any distribution into them. And so I think it's really unique to hear the focus on developing the rural food system, but also being prepared to support it. You're kind of playing a role in the food chain that co-ops in larger communities are like definitely avoiding. Like we'll be your holding facility.
Yeah, yeah, it's hard. It's not, and it doesn't have to stop um, providing access. In fact, the co-op structure itself can help a rural community get the kind of access to food that it needs. No one would be putting the money into a store this size in a town this size on their own as an individual store. In fact, the individual grocer finally gave up against Walmart. They can't compete. Conventional food prices can't compete. And we can differentiate because we have a different set of groceries than a conventional grocer does. So we survive on that. But it can be done, and it has to be done in a way that brings everybody together. And again, I'll go back to structure by doing it. You don't When you're starting a co-op, I see the same mistakes happening now that happened 25 years ago when startups go up. They do a fee, an annual fee for membership instead of an equity fee, right? Because an annual fee seems like it might bring in more income every year for people. But the special sauce of a co-op structure is that equity membership sits on your balance sheet and strengthens your business so that when you do have to go and get a loan for a new cooler or for a move to a bigger spot, the bank says, oh, there's equity, there's ownership equity in your business. Yes, we can give you a loan. That's more important. So following that structure is part of the success, even in a rural spot when you're starting small.
Absolutely. It's terrific advice. And I will say to those of you, some of you might be in communities where you're in rural community and natural foods isn't what your community wants. We have seen great success with it being a huge focus on local. So local produce, especially in areas where a lot of meat is grown. So a lot of local meat, a local produce, but too, and local dairy, but a lot of local meat. And then filling the center store with what is higher priced conventional food because that's what they can afford. But people have said it's important enough to us to have access to those things in the neighborhood, and we shop the co-op because of the local. So even if your differentiator isn't that, I mean, your community doesn't want organic food and is rural, we have seen the model work on a small scale, not on the Viroqua scale, but on a small scale with a major focus on local and then just having conventional basics that, people don't want to drive 20, 30 minutes to get.
Mhm. Yeah. Having a few choices for convenience is what gets that mid-level shopper to buy three or four more things, right? So one of the things, I'll give you an example. One of the things that we put our stake in the ground about, there's a couple sections in the store that we really like say, this is what we're going to do. Coffee is one of them, right? It's got to be fair trade organic coffee. Chocolate is another one. Those two are so exploitive for labor out in the world that we want to go there. And bananas and avocados is another thing. We're going to do organic, fair trade bananas and avocados. They're really expensive compared to conventional avocados
Yeah.
and bananas, both of which are a dirty or are clean 15 or can be they're not so bad because they have tough outer skins of conventional, right? So people will go to another store to get a 99-cent avocado, which is rare. Even now, I know they're more expensive than that, even at the
Occasionally.
conventional store, but you know what I mean. So
Hmm.
when we said we want that person to stay here and buy three or four more things, that's what's going to make this place work. We said we're not going to make a ton of money on avocados and bananas. We're going to buy our conventional or I mean our organic and fair trade or bananas and avocados, and we're going to drop it down to 6% margin. And we're just going to have it be a loss leader, not quite a loss leader, but down to the just enough margin to get it off the truck and put it out on the floor because people will say that price is close enough. I don't have to go to another store. And now they're going to buy the other stuff that they were going to go. They'll buy toilet paper and they'll buy dog food. And because they don't have to go to another store, it's close enough. So those kinds of strategies are what helped us grow. And that's digging in and leaning on GM. That's not board work. That's like internal work.
That is absolutely true. And startups, I have seen some startups lean in on some of this stuff and thinking through what those core things are, surveying owners and getting the information, turning it over to the gym when they arrive. No one's saying like it can't help. I actually have one startup that they went around and priced all those core things at the options. They're within a 1 mile walk of the co-op, put it in a spreadsheet and handed it to the gym. And the gym has said to this day that was super helpful. Like
Yeah,
that was great research. Thank you. It's not that there isn't a role, a transition phase, and it also is a chance to educate yourself on what your
yeah.
store and your GM are going to be up against. But yeah, in the end, that's GM work.
Well,
So,
and I would go back even like from Jamie's question, and hi Jamie, by the way. Um, the things that we used to resist as a rural store, we now realize help make the store more convenient to our shoppers. And the things we resisted at first was we're not going to put ibuprofen on the shelf, right? And when we did, it was really important. So I literally have my purchasing person go to a local inexpensive store and buy stick matches, borax, washing soda, generic ibuprofen, which you can get from UNFI now. But, just a couple of things that make it convenient for people to stay in the store and just get that thing that they need. Um, and that's a little bit of stepping out of what often people think a co-op should be doing.
and I think
But
it's much more essential in rural co-ops. We have comments in that's been hearted many times that you should write a book, Jan. Uh,
oh, please.
I'm going to wrap us up now. Thank you guys for this conversation. Jan, thank you so much for agreeing to do this. I think some of the insights of just talking to someone who has lived it from the sales floor is something that startups don't really get to hear. And someone who had some of those same perspectives and had, and how you learned to look at it. So everyone just want to take a moment to thank Jan for being here with us today and just being a continual supporter of the startup movement quietly and this time out loud. We got to get her to do it out loud.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And I just want to say I got so much help from my peers over the years. So I am happy to return that kind of energy to co-ops that want to start anywhere.
You heard her, so you know where to find her. I do want to real quickly thank again all of our sponsors. We had a record number of sponsors who believe in FCI Live and making it free to you. Thank you to them. Please check them out and support them. We have coming up later today, Grocery Industry Basics with Jade Barker. Y'all said, you guys don't teach us enough about the grocery industry, so we think we can be the cheapest in town or we can do all these things because you didn't teach us what we're up against in the grocery industry. Fair point. Jade Barker is going to be with us talking about just what is this industry you're getting into? What is the terminology? What do you need to know about what is possible, what is not possible within its confines, even as a cooperative? And then late tonight, I am doing post-open stage 5 organizing. This is about the new stage of turns out you're still a startup after you open until your store is stabilized and meets the dream and the goal and isn't in crisis mode. What is it? What should you expect? I'll be talking about that tonight. We've got 2 more days, Wednesday and Thursday, and I hope you will join us for some of that. And
JQ, can I ask a quick question?
in just a moment. Yo.
Okay.
Doo, doo, doo.